The build-up to Mount Hyjal provides conflict on so many levels. It's the first time that the Horde and the Alliance truly team up together to counter a cosmic threat. Not only that, but it enables a particular character to be brought back into the story. If this is your first time visiting the channel, welcome. My name is Quaylen, and I'm in the middle of abridging the World of Warcraft Chronicle series. That means I'm taking the lore contained within these books and condensing it even more than it already is. I'm not diving into the deep details or the novels that have more information, just sticking to what's written in the books. So again, apart from what you read in the title of the video or saw in the thumbnail, I'll be sharing other sections of lore that may not be related to what grabbed your attention in the first place. In essence, I'm telling the story in order as the books tell it. Currently, we're on Volume 3, but if you want to start from the beginning, then I suggest clicking the link in the tab up above or in the description down below. That will lead you to a video that contains all 10 episodes covering the lore in Volume 1. But if you're already caught up with the story, then let's continue our journey into the tales of Azeroth. Jaina and her Alliance refugees pushed towards Stone Talon Peak through brutal terrain, struggling daily to find food and water. Jaina kept her own doubts hidden and held her people together through sheer determination, believing the hooded stranger would reveal something there that could help save the world. Upon reaching the foothills of the Stone Talon Mountains, Jaina's forces were ambushed by Grommash Hellscream and his Warsong orcs, who had been secretly trailing them through Ashenvale. The Alliance repelled the attack, and Jaina led her people up the mountain slopes, leaving some forces behind to hold off any pursuit. Thrall and the rest of the Horde arrived shortly after, surprised to find Alliance forces in the area, but relieved to reunite with Grommash and the Warsongs. Thrall had no desire for a needless conflict and ordered his people to leave the Alliance alone. But something was wrong. Since arriving in Ashenvale, the orcs had become increasingly aggressive and bloodthirsty, as if reverting to the ways of the old Horde. Grommash and his Warsongs were the worst offenders, repeatedly defying Thrall's orders and attacking Alliance soldiers. Unable to control them, Thrall sent the Warsongs deeper into Ashenvale to build an outpost, hoping the hard labor would keep them occupied until he returned from Stone Talon Peak. The Warsongs obeyed reluctantly, viewing the assignment as a humiliating insult. They channeled their fury into the forest, cutting down vast swaths of ancient trees to construct their outpost. The destruction did not go unnoticed. Ashenvale was not theirs to claim. It belonged to the Night Elves. Now, we've talked about this before, but it was back in Volume 1. So, as a refresher, let's do a quick history lesson about the Night Elves. The Night Elves were one of the oldest races in the world, builders of a vast empire made possible by the Well of Eternity, a powerful fount of arcane energy that formed the foundation of their civilization. Over generations, their mastery of its power grew, producing gifted and ambitious sorcerers, chief among them Queen Azshara and an elite group known as the Highborn. Driven by an insatiable hunger for greater power, Azshara and the Highborn made a pact with the Burning Legion and summoned demons into the world. The Night Elves fractured, and a resistance rose to expel the Legion, joined by other native races and the ancient wild gods. The conflict became known as the War of the Ancients. Among the war's greatest heroes were the priestess Tyrande Whisperwind, the druid Malfurion Stormrage, and his twin brother, Illidan. Illidan abandoned his allies mid-conflict, believing he could feign allegiance to the Legion, gain its power, and use it to destroy the demons from within. Illidan did gain power, but at a devastating cost. His eyes were burned away and replaced with smoldering pits of magic, and his skin was scarred with fell tattoos. His people saw only a traitor. The resistance ultimately struck at Ashara and the Well of Eternity directly. The battle caused the fount to implode, in a catastrophe called the Great Sundering, shattering Azeroth's single landmass into separate continents and forever changing the world. The survivors fled to Hyjal Summit, where they discovered that Illidan had arrived ahead of them and secretly created a second Well of Eternity using energies he had saved from the original. He believed the elves would need it if the Legion ever returned, but his people viewed it as yet another betrayal. Malfurion had him imprisoned in a burrow deep underground. To prevent the Legion from ever exploiting the new fount, the dragon aspects Alexstrasza, Ysera, and Nosdormu intervened. Alexstrasza planted an enchanted seed at the well, which grew into the colossal world tree Nordrassil, capping the fount and preventing its misuse. The aspects also blessed the tree with powerful enchantments, granting the Night Elves immortality and a gateway to the Emerald Dream. Malfurion dedicated himself to training druids who studied nature magic and tended to the health of the wilds, often leaving their bodies behind to walk the Emerald Dream in spirit form. Leadership of the Night Elf Society passed to Tyrande Whisperwind. Tyrande steered her people away from empire building and reckless magic, fostering a cautious and insular culture. To protect their borders, she founded a military order called the Sentinels, hardened warriors who established outposts throughout Ashenvale and the edges of Night Elven territory. The Sentinels were not alone in defending the forests. They could call upon fey spirits, awakened druids, and a host of powerful woodland creatures, chimeras, fairy dragons, treants, dryads, and keepers of the grove, to aid them in battle. The mightiest of these allies was the wild god Cenarius, who had taught the Night Elves druidism and fought alongside them in the War of the Ancients. Having witnessed the devastation that the Legion could unleash, Cenarius worked closely with the Night Elves and forest spirits to ensure such a catastrophe would never happen again. The Night Elves were largely aware of events in the Eastern Kingdoms, but rarely intervened, and when they did, it was always quietly. It was the druids sensing the plague of undeath spreading through the wilds from within the Emerald Dream who first recognized a threat was growing across the sea. Though their efforts to stop the blight from the Emerald Dream had little effect, the druids reported what they had witnessed to Tyrande. Despite her isolationism, she recognized a familiar and terrible force behind the plague. She sensed the Legion. And with that recognition, the Night Elves' long vigil was about to be tested as never before. The Sentinels reported strangers in Ashenvale. Tyrande was relieved to find they were not demons, but her relief was short-lived. The Warsong orcs were felling trees and pillaging the forest without care, and Tyrande would not tolerate it. She ordered the Sentinels to strike. The Sentinels proved a ferocious match for the Warsongs, attacking from the trees and on the backs of hippogriffs and night sabers. Cenarius joined the assault as well, sensing demon blood in the orcs' veins and believing them to be Legion servants. Together, the Night Elves and their forest allies pushed the Warsongs to the brink of defeat. Desperate and cornered, Gromosh and his warriors sensed a dark and familiar energy nearby. They tracked it to a pool of emerald liquid hidden deep in the forest. It was demon blood. Before we continue, I'd like to mention that if you're enjoying this content, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, if you feel inclined to support the work that I'm doing, you can check out my membership options here on YouTube or on Patreon. I'm really grateful for all of those who have supported this massive project that I've been working on for quite some time now, and I do offer early access to all those people who have signed up. So if you're interested, check out the links down below, and let's get back to the story. The demon blood in Ashenvale was no accident. Mannoroth and Tichondrius had come to Kalimdor on Archimonde's orders to weaken its defenses ahead of the Legion's invasion. Most of Kalimdor's creatures posed little threat, but Cenarius and the Wild Gods had fiercely resisted the Legion during the War of the Ancients and stood as the greatest obstacle between the demons and the Second Will of Eternity. To neutralize Cenarius, the demons had brought the Skull of Gul'dan to Kalimdor, now infused with even greater fell power. They planned to use it to slowly poison Ashenvale's woodlands and sap Cenarius' strength. But the arrival of the orcs presented a faster opportunity. The curse of Mannoroth's blood still lingered in the orcs' veins from years past, making them susceptible to his influence. His mere presence in Ashenvale had been amplifying their aggression and driving them toward violence. Now, on the verge of defeat against Cenarius, the orcs needed more power, and Mannoroth was ready to provide it, knowing that drinking his blood would enslave them to the Legion once again. Grommash suspected the danger, but saw no other way to save his warriors. He drank from the pool, and his followers did the same. Filled with the supernatural power, the Warsongs tore through Ashenvale, and Grommash himself cut down Cenarius in single combat. At the moment of Cenarius' death, the wilds around Hyjal darkened and shuddered. Dryads, chimeras, treants, and other forest creatures fled in horror, and many would not return for the duration of the war. Only after it was over did Grommash learn the true source of his power. By then, it was too late. He and his warriors were once again bound to Mannoroth's will. Thrall and Jaina led their separate forces up the Stone Talon Mountains and came face to face in the caverns at the peak. Blades were drawn and conflict seemed inevitable, until Medivh revealed himself, stopping both sides in their tracks. With only one chance to win them over, Medivh held nothing back. He told them the Burning Legion's invasion had already begun and that the world stood on the edge of annihilation. No single faction could survive alone, but united, they had a chance. To make the stakes undeniable, Medivh revealed what had happened to Grommash and his Warsongs. They had drunk Mannoroth's blood and were once again enslaved to the Pit Lord. This, he warned, was the fate awaiting all orcs if a united front was not formed against the Legion. The news devastated Thrall. He had sworn his people would never return to that darkness, and if allying with his enemies was what it took to keep that promise, he would do it. Jaina was deeply reluctant, but her knowledge of the Legion's power convinced her that refusing to act would render every sacrifice made in Lordaeron meaningless. An uneasy truce was struck. Thrall and Jaina did not fully trust each other, but they were willing to set aside old hatreds and fight together for now. Their first test as unlikely allies would be confronting Grommash Hellscream and the corrupted Warsongs. The United Horde and Alliance moved against the blood-crazed Warsongs, who were so consumed by rage that they attacked friend and foe alike. Thrall led a daring charge through their lines and captured Grommash, after which Horde shamans and Alliance priests combined their magic to purge the bloodlust from him. When the haze of hatred finally lifted, Grommash was overwhelmed by shame, and by rage at the one responsible, Mannoroth. Knowing the Pit Lord had to be stopped, Thrall and Grommash tracked Mannoroth to a fell-corrupted canyon in southeastern Ashenvale. Mannoroth was dismissive of them both, swatting Thrall aside with ease and expecting no resistance from Grommash, who he considered his loyal slave. He was wrong. Though the blood curse still burned in Grommash's veins, something burned hotter, the desire to free his people. He buried his axe in the Pit Lord's chest, and Mannoroth's body erupted in a blinding explosion of fell energy. Mannoroth was dead, but the victory came at a devastating cost. The explosion mortally wounded Grommash, and he died at Thrall's side. Content in the knowledge that he had redeemed himself and freed the orcs from the Legion's curse forever. The site of his sacrifice would come to be known as Demon Fall Canyon, a place of pilgrimage for orcs, honoring the warrior who had finally broken the chains of the blood curse. Though Mannoroth had fallen, his mission was accomplished. Cenarius was dead, and the forest spirit's strength was greatly diminished. Archimonde launched his invasion of Kalimdor, raining infernals from the sky and flooding Ashenvale's eastern edges with thousands of undead and demons. The defenders, Night Elves, forest spirits, and the combined Horde and Alliance armies fought on scattered, separate fronts and were easily overwhelmed. The Legion marched steadily toward Hyjal's summit, crushing everything in its path. Unwilling to leave anything to chance, Archimonde turned to one final weapon, the Skull of Gul'dan, still in Tichondrius' possession. With Cenarius already dead, the skull's fell energies could now be used to poison the forests and carve a clear path to the second Well of Eternity. Tichondrius moved ahead of the main army and unleashed the skull's power into the earth near Hyjal. The fell magic spread rapidly, warping trees and wildlife into Legion servants and turning the region's rivers a sickly green. The corrupted forest became known as Fellwood. The fell energies continued creeping up Hyjal's slopes, corrupting everything in their path. If left unchecked, they would soon reach the shores of the second Well of Eternity, allowing the Legion to advance through the darkened wilds with almost no resistance. As Archimonde's forces defiled Ashenvale, Tyrande knew the Legion's true target was the second Well of Eternity and the power it would give them to consume the entire world. She needed every weapon available to defend Hyjal, including the Druids, who had not yet emerged from the Emerald Dream. The reason for the Druids' absence was Cenarius. His death had sent a shockwave through the Emerald Dream, weakening and trapping Malfurion and his followers within the Eternal Realm. When Tyrande finally managed to rouse Malfurion, he was horrified by what had become of Ashenvale. Fell fire and toxic blight consuming the forests he had dedicated his life to protecting. Malfurion immediately set out to awaken the other druids, sending some to reinforce the sentinels and others to rally the remaining forest creatures and wild gods. Without Cenarius to lead them, the woodland spirits were elusive and difficult to reach, but the Night Elves tried regardless. The long journey to awake the druids gave Malfurion and Tyrande time together after centuries apart. Malfurion found Tyrande changed, fiercer, more resolute, and more willing than ever to make any sacrifice for her people. He would soon discover just how far she was willing to go. Deep within one of Hyjal's borrowed dens, they came upon a gateway, the prison of Illidan Stormrage, the Betrayer. Tyrande saw in Illidan a powerful weapon against the Legion, a sorcerer whose knowledge of demons was unmatched among the Night Elves. Malfurion was vehemently opposed, convinced his brother remained a danger to the world. Tyrande made her decision alone. When the Watchers, an order that had guarded Illidan for millennia, refused to release him, she cut them down without hesitation. From the darkness of the Barrow, the Betrayer emerged. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this kind of content, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the work that I'm doing, please check out my YouTube, Patreon, or Twitch memberships. And a big shout out to all the names on the screen here. You mean so much to me. Thank you so much for your help. And with that, I'll see you guys next time on the Tales of Azeroth.